Brandon, you know what nobody tells you about a Missouri summer? You can go from 100 degrees to a full-on thunderstorm or tornado faster than you can get through the line at Ted Drew's. Anyway, if you're doing a float trip, a lake day, or just sitting on the back porch listening to a ball game, Curio Wellness has your summer covered. Chill chews for when the goal is doing absolutely nothing. Thrive if you're the one steering the canoe. Exclusive flower if you want to make the whole season feel a little bit extra. And sex chews for whenever that's the plan. They've also got a limited batch of cotton candy chews that are only around for the summer. So grab them before they're gone. Curio Wellness. Line up your summer. Welcome to Greenway Audio Magazine. I am Tim, and we have Brandon with me, as always. But today, we have Michael Flemmens. Now, Michael, Executive Vice President of Research and Technical Business Development at SōRSE Technology. That's a long title.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it means, really. I do a lot of stuff. I wear a lot of hats.
It sounds like
so
it.
That's why I have a big title.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Now, SōRSE Technology, you guys are based in Chicago, correct?
The parent company is based in Seattle. Yeah, we have a whole bevy of products and offerings. Our core competency is to support beverages, tinctures, most liquid delivery systems. We have some patented technology on turning cannabinoids into a water dispersible platform so that you can add it seamlessly into beverages, tinctures. You can do it in gummies. We have powders. We make topicals. We have a bevy of ways we go to market. But I say our core competency is building cannabis emulsions for liquid delivery systems.
Okay. So that was one of the things I really wanted to get into and understand, because in my brain, it's taking tinctured oil and putting it in seltzer and then just shaking it up. I'm assuming that's not the process.
It's slightly more complicated than that.
I would imagine. Yes.
Yeah, I always say the easiest analogy I can draw for most people is almost everyone is familiar with when you go to the grocery store and you're looking for salad dressing, sitting on the shelf, the Italian salad dressing, that basically is split in two. You have the water and vinegar in one phase, and then you have the oil in the other phase. They don't like to be together, oil and water. And that is the problem with cannabis, is that the cannabinoids present as an oil. So much like your Italian salad dressing, if you take it home, buy it, take it home, shake it up, by the time you're pouring it on your salad, it's starting to separate almost immediately again.
Sure.
So there are tricks of the trade where you can adjust the oil phase so that it wants to be in contact with water much more than it does in its natural native state.
Got it.
You sound like somebody that doesn't come from cannabis. Like I'm
Yes.
not trying to lump everybody into a little box or anything like that. But in my experience, a lot of people that are in charge of manufacturing operations and stuff, they either come from cannabis and they're like, here's how we make the weed into this. And then there's people that come from science backgrounds and a lot of times from other industries and have taken that and applied it to cannabis technology. You seem like you may be one of the latter rather than the former.
Yeah.
That's
we need
certainly
people like
the case.
you. Okay, good.
I am classically, I am a biochemist by training. So the
Boom.
science
Okay.
part.
Yes. Yeah.
I have spent my entire career inside of regulated industries. So food and beverage, veterinary foods and feeds, supplements, medical device, and pharmaceuticals. So I've covered all the silos of the FDA.
Yeah.
But one of the compelling things as I make career changes is I sort of gravitate towards businesses and avenues that help other people, that have a positive benefit in one way, shape, or form. And so the cannabis plant helps a tremendous amount of people in so many different ways. Uh, so that was very appealing to get into the field as sort of the beginning of the next phase of the gold rush, where you are starting to see the proliferation of, medical research, therapeutic research, homeopathic research. So there's a tremendous amount of benefits, and I think we're just starting to scratch the surface on everything that this plant can do for us and the compounds in the plant. So that was really sort of the appeal. But no, I'm not a bored and dyed in the wool cannabis person to start with.
Well, I can tell you from somebody that's been in the industry for a bit now, having someone like you come in and have comments like that, I don't know, it gives me a little warm feeling. To have somebody from outside the industry that has worked in other fields come in and go, I see what this is doing. I want to be a part of it and try to make it better. And I love conversations like this. So mm, this is great. So as far as, so on the cannabis side, you got the beverages and what other types of, what types of products does your technology work with?
The easiest analogy I can draw is, again, go back to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Anything that you can build with either water or a powder is pretty much everything in the grocery store. So Katie bar the door, it's up to the individual customer, client's dreams, wishes, thought process as to what you can build. There really is no limit to the technology. It only comes back to, can we make it commercially viable for the person? So
Okay. Yeah. So as far as, I'm still harping on the cannabis beverages because I feel like we're getting it. We're not there yet. I feel like, there's been that I see them there. There's options, a lot are high dose. Do you ever think we'll get to a point where we will see a lot more low dose, more beverages that are easily accessible to the public?
yeah, I mean, I think we're really sitting in phase one of
Right.
adoption of cannabis beverages. And when you take a look at the overall market, it's fairly well bifurcated. So you have your classic, I've been consuming cannabis in one form or another for a long time. I'm very comfortable with it. I know what it does. I know what my usage is. And sort of some of that audience sort of prefers a significantly higher dose simply because their tolerance is high and they're comfortable with it, they're consuming. And then you have the other set of the segment, and that's again a little bit bifurcated, where you have people that are like, hey, I've done it once or twice. I'd maybe have a gummy here or there or mints or whatever, but I'm not a big fan of perhaps smoking. And so the beverages greatly appeal to that subset of the market where they don't want to do it through inhalation. And then you have the other set of the piece is sort of the canna curious group where, maybe you're advanced in age and starting to have some health issues, and you've been hearing about how your neighbor or your friend is, consuming a low dose beverage, and all of a sudden their joint pain is reduced, or they're sleeping better at night, or whatever the rationale is. So, and again, most of those kind of curious people are not in the mindset where it's like, well, I've never smoked anything in my life, so let me start taking up smoking.
Right.
Um, so this is plus it gives, I think the other really interesting attribute is it allows people to do this unconspicuously. Um, So you can go to your last 4th of July barbecue, and if you're not drinking alcohol, as we know, alcohol sales are way down, and there's this subset that are reducing their alcohol intake or not drinking, but they still want to be part of the social scene. So you have a very compelling reason to say, "Hey, I'm still gonna enjoy. I want to unwind a little bit. I'm gonna have some lower dose." So you want something that's sessionable,
Mm-hmm.
where you can take a 6-pack to a barbecue or a party and drink them over the span of X amount of hours and still be okay to get home and not
Right.
need the couch. So it's really a really interesting avenue and approach. I think it's opened up cannabis to a vast majority of people where it hadn't been open before.
Open new doors to market movement at MJ Unpacked, coming to Kansas City, Missouri, October 14th and 15th. Uncover opportunities that don't exist in day-to-day markets, explore expert-led conference sessions, and build meaningful connections in the exhibit hall. And for the first time, celebrate Missouri's top brands at the MJU MoCan Cup Awards. Register now and get your pass for as little as $49 with early bird pricing. Plus, save an additional 20% with code Greenway20. Visit mjunpacked.com and we'll see you in Kansas City. One of the things that SōRSE is doing, from my perspective, is everything that you guys are helping companies do and all the technology that you guys are bringing forward to the cannabis industry specifically, it's all going to be FDA eligible, in my assumption. Because whenever we think of FDA regulations and things like that, there's a possibility that anything inhalable, whether it's vaporizers, whether it's flour, pre-rolls, anything like that, those may have some really big obstacles with the FDA later on. But you guys, whenever we're talking about gummies, we're talking about tinctures, we're talking about topicals, and we're talking about beverages, those are all things that the FDA already regulates in different industries and in different facets. And all of them in one way, shape, or form have already been used in medical lines before as well. And that's the direction that rescheduling is kind of driving cannabis towards, is where's the medical value and where's the line between medical and recreational. And from the outside, I see SōRSE as a company that is kind of steering that conversation, not from the regulatory perspective, but from the perspective of, if you're not using these technologies, if you're not producing these products, we're a way for you to start getting yourself ready for the possibility that you may not be able to do exactly what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. That's sort of the approach we've taken since day one, is that we've staffed the company with mostly non-cannabis people that have come out of, different regulated industries, because what we see is, you know, inhalation is a tall order for the FDA. When and again, like as we get further into medical cannabis research, like let's say even if your doctor just said that, you would benefit greatly from a small dose of nicotine, they're not going to give you a script to go to the gas station and buy Marlboros, right?
Nicotine gum.
They're going to give you gum or pouches or a patch or some other form. So when you look at the evolution of some of these compounds that perhaps were taken for pleasure or leisure or whatever, and now we're finding medicinal use for them, now we need to pigeonhole those compounds into routes that the FDA is comfortable with, but even more importantly, formats that they're familiar with, because that will greatly expedite approval processes when they don't have to come up the learning curve as to what else is burning in that pre-roll that you're smoking, and what are those compounds doing, and do they have any deleterious effect on the effects of cannabinoids. And Like, you don't want to answer all those questions, and it's just way too expensive to do the research. So, you know, hey, we can look at single compound moieties, which again is very important for the FDA, because when they look at when you look at pharmaceuticals, we're talking about a single compound, right? So we're, you know, ibuprofen. It's not ibuprofen, and it also has 57 terpenes and 17 derivatives of ibuprofen. It's a single compound because then you can study it. So being able to sort of go backwards thinking and say, we're going to take a compound initially, and we're going to turn that into a product that we can put it in front of the FDA in a format that they're familiar with. So we've got an isolated compound in a very familiar format. There's still going to be plenty of questions, and the hurdles are going to be in front of us, but we want to take as many of those hurdles away as possible.
I think one of the things that's interesting about what you and Tim said at the beginning, you said that this is kind of the introduction to the cannabis beverage space and stuff like that. And the timing around the introduction to the cannabis beverage space for most people kind of co-aligns with the Farm Bill of 2018 and then the introduction of all these hemp beverages and things. We've had keef and we've had, some sodas and things like that, but it seemed like the hemp beverage explosion really drove, more beverages into the cannabis space. We saw Mary Jones come into legal markets. We saw a rise in some of the additive formulations like Ripple and Sprinkle, and in Missouri we have the High Five stirrables and things like that, the additives. We've also seen like the Select Squeeze, and we've seen a lot of Wink and Can and all these different beverages come into the space. Some of the ones that were in the legal marijuana market even branched over into the hemp market because it allowed them access to every state for the most part very quickly. And now we're going to see some recession from that, but it exposed a large number of people in a very short period of time. What are the things that consumers, whenever they're going and looking at cannabis beverages or cannabis products on a shelf, what are the things they're not realizing went into making that product? And why is it not as simple as what Tim said, not just dropping it in there and shaking it up? And, how are you guys solving those problems for companies?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll peel that back just one layer too, and say that I think, like, you're absolutely correct. There were some beverage platforms in the traditional dispensary channels prior to the hemp beverages coming along. That was twofold issues. One was they traditionally were higher dose and not very approachable by the person who's just curious and wants to try it. But there's also a fairly large stigma associated with going to your dispensary and shopping. And in fairness, for for the new people, many dispensaries can be fairly intimidating. Um, and so I think the hemp beverage, being able to put hemp beverages in grocery stores and liquor stores, took away that stigma of the dispensary and made it very approachable, because no one's judging you if you walk into a liquor store, but your neighbor might judge you for walking into a dispensary, right? And so I think that low dose format and making it approachable where consumers can get it in their normal shopping patterns was really helpful. And then, so sort of your second part is that, when you think about oils are lighter, less dense than water. Oil and water classically don't go together. And so there's traditional mechanisms that you can leverage from medical, pharmaceutical, and the majority of it is food and beverage. Most people are unfamiliar with the fact that if you really look in the label of a Gatorade has an emulsion in it. Um, and and people are comfortable consuming Gatorade, they don't even think. They're just like, it's electrolytes. It's good for me. But interesting, they don't have the same stigma. They're like, well, it's THC. I don't know if that's good for me or not. And I don't know how they put it in there. And I look
It's
at the same
Brondo.
way.
It's good for plants.
um, so what we do without giving away the farm is the fact that we sort of adjust through the magic of chemistry and process. We convert the oil phase into micronized sized droplets, and then sort of enrobe those droplets with, traditionally that's called an emulsifier. And an emulsifier is not a scary science word. It just means soap is an emulsifier. That's how it takes the grease off your dishes, is that one end of the surfactant or emulsifier likes to be in water, and then one end of that likes to be in oil. So you have a hydrophilic, which is a water loving, and a lipophilic, which is the oil loving. And then basically the easiest way to describe them is think of the engine and a caboose on a train. But they don't want to be together. They have these couplers. Well, once you put the coupler in, now we've got a train, and now we've got this thing that can go wherever we want. Because if the engine takes off, the caboose stays put. So when we think about cannabis, what we do is we sort of turn it into little droplets and then enrobe it from a thinking about it conceptually perspective. Think of these droplets as sort of an M&M, where the chocolate of the M&M is the cannabinoids. It could be a single cannabinoid, it could be blend, it could be cannabinoids and terpenes, whatever you want to deliver. That's basically the payload. And then the SōRSE technology is what puts the sort of candy coating shell on the outside of the chocolate. And that does a couple things. It keeps the droplet that size, so it doesn't want to re-expand, because if you give it room for growth and you don't preclude it from expanding, it will find other oil droplets and it will be like, I like you better than I like the water. I'm going to be with you. And then we separate. And then SōRSE goes a step further, is it's all well and good to get the cannabis into the beverage. But in many instances, consumers are not necessarily consuming the whole thing at once. We've seen the proliferation of large format 750 ml bottle products, right? You don't want that cannabis to be all at the top or all at the bottom.
That
and
was
you
my
don't
next
want,
question.
You don't
Yes.
want to get all at once or none at once. And so it's really important to have that cannabis distributed exceptionally uniformly throughout the fluid contents. And it doesn't matter if it's a 2.5 milligram small beverage, 750 ml product, 1,000 milligram tincture. You want it to be uniform and homogeneous. So our tech is we apply a bit of a cationic charge, a positive charge, to that candy coating shell. And so what happens is now all those droplets have an identical charge. So think about magnets. If we bring two North Pole magnets in close proximity to themselves, they repel. So what we have is we have these droplets coming in proximity and repelling each other because they're all charged the same. So rather than creating a static, homogeneous thing, which is basically a house of cards, we have intentionally introduced as much chaos into the system. So it is not stable. It is continuously mixing. And because it's continuously mixing itself, it's homogeneous and then it's stable. So that way we're
That is,
able
yeah.
to deliver the dose that we want every single time.
Yeah. And that's
Michael
the big
Flemmens,
thing.
anarchist.
Little chaos
Michael,
is good for everyone.
it is. It really is. You read my mind, because I keep thinking about the consumer experience and how this does retain potency and how it remains stable. Because if you don't want to take a couple sips, you have a 10 milligram seltzer, take a couple sips, whatever, and then you have it sit there for a while, and then you finish the rest, and that's where the 10 milligrams is. you know that's not a great experience for a consumer. So I was curious about that, but I'm also curious about shelf life. Is that different? When you're talking about a soda or a beer, you gotta ways. It can sit there for a while. Is it different with THC?
It's a little bit it's more stable than well, we'll dial it back. So your lager is good for 12 months, right? There's not a lot of stuff in there to change. It says about the light strike and oxidation, but your IPAs go off really quick. So like a 6-month IPA does not taste like a 3-month or a 1-month IPA. So there's the terpenes and the other compounds in cannabis are susceptible to degradation.
Okay.
I'm just gonna put it out there. I used to hide Milwaukee's Best in the ditch outside of my house in Missouri summers. So 3-month, 6-month, 12-month, it all tasted like Milwaukee's Best in a hot July summer in a ditch with no refrigeration. So
It's one of those you got to do what you got to do when you got to
That's right.
do it.
That's right.
But yeah, there's and there's another interesting when it comes down to stability. The hops that are used in beer and the cannabis plant are essentially kissing cousins genetically.
Huh. Interesting.
There's some interesting attributes that brewers stumbled upon, whether it was when Boston Beer came out with their IPAs or probably more closely to Ken Grossman in Sierra Nevada when he started pumping out IPAs all over the place. Those terpenes and aromatic compounds inside of hops have an affinity for the can liner.
Mm.
So they stick to the can liner, and that phenomenon is called scalping. Cannabis does exactly the same thing, interestingly.
Okay.
So you can actually, if folks don't do a robust job of keeping the cannabis safe from attack by the can liner or precluding that attack, you can take a beverage that's say a month old, you can pour it out and you can analyze it, and maybe a 10 ml beverage, and you're going to find 7.5. They're like, well, where did it go? It didn't leave the can, it didn't escape. There is a little bit of loss to degradation over time, like very minor, but then you can put some alcohol in the can, swish it around, pour it out, now analyze that, and then you find most of the rest. So
Wow.
it sticks to the cans, and so there's
I
quite a few people that are and cans are really popular because just like hops and cannabis is susceptible to light strike. So clear bottles, while marketing loves them, clear bottles are not the product developer's best friend. So you want to avoid light strike, you want to avoid oxidation if you can, and not a problem for most beverages because they're carbonated, so that's no issue. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to be an eternally stable. It's not like honey or salt, which is going to last forever. It has a shelf life. Um, all compounds which provide an efficacious or therapeutic benefit almost entirely have a shelf life.
can I ask a real
It's
quick
amazing.
question? Because I hate carbonation.
Okay.
I drink the only energy drinks I drink are these and the Monster Rehab because they're non-carbonated. You just said something that I've never heard and never understood or anything like that. So the reason that a lot of companies carbonate beverages is because it allows for longer shelf life?
In part, you can get longer shelf life with the
Huh.
carbonated beverages because in that when you're carbing your packaging vessel right before filling, you're pumping in CO2 and you're stripping dissolved oxygen out of the water and it goes out the tank. So it's that oxidative degradation that plays a role in the degradation of the compounds that we love so much. Yeah, carbonation's a nice safety blanket. You can still build shelf stable, robust still products. It just requires a little bit more thought and work into what you're doing. Um, so there are mechanisms by which you can strip And classically, we call it the DO level, which is the dissolved oxygen level. So you want to get the DO level down as low as possible. Brewers are very keen on this topic because oxygen left over in their beer will skunk it. So there's a lot of industry know-how in that regard, that you can make a very shelf-stable still beverage. It's just a little more costly, a little bit harder to make than a carbonated one.
I won't complain about $1.89 a can for my rock stars anymore then.
This is mind blowing. I mean, like I am learning so much that this is great. Holy cow. One of the other things I was thinking is this more difficult to test than, just some flour? Like how
Yeah.
difficult is it to test this?
Well, it's not difficult, it's just different.
Okay.
So most of the testing methodologies came out of the regulated states, the dispensary channels, and they're used to testing flour or some percentage of gummies. Flour tends to be significantly high in THC. So the methodologies that these labs created to test for THC levels they were like, well, we don't want to blind the detector because so much THC is in the flour. So they have what we call a high side bias, which means those methods that existed prior to 2018 Farm Bill were used to looking at really high dose stuff, and they really were horrible at looking at anything less than 10 milligrams, say. And then so there's that component to it. The second component is the fact that because we build this micellular structure, the M&M, and we've got this protective shell on it, it's protected. Like, it's now harder to get to the THC. So what we found early on is that if we were going in with a 2.5 milligram low dose beverage with our emulsified cannabinoids in it, the labs were like, it's zero. We were like, it's impossible, right? I know I put it in there. So it turns out it was twofold. Their methodologies when they were doing the sample prep prior to analysis were not sufficient where they could break open those M's and release the THC. And then their method was used to looking at, 50 plus milligrams per sample and not 2.5 or 5. All things solvable. Most of the testing labs now are pretty good at testing a wide range of dosages.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also many labs have now figured out how to break an emulsified product inside a beverage. And so I think we solve for every once in a while we still run into one, but we have some analytical chemists on staff and we just put them on the phone with the testing lab and go, you're not breaking the emulsion, or you need to adjust this in your methodology. And within a week's time, they're right.
Big news from Kind Goods. Kind Goods Afton is officially open, giving St. Louis another convenient way to experience Kind Goods. Whether you're looking for flour, vapes, edibles, concentrates, or pre-rolls, you'll find a great selection and something for everyone. Not sure where to start? The friendly, knowledgeable bud tenders at Kind Goods can help you find what's right for you. It's the same great experience you've come to expect from Kind Goods. Now in Afton, locally owned and operated, Kind Goods is proud to be part of the St. Louis community. 7 locations, 1 Kind Goods.
Are you ready to find your fire? New Daybreak Fortifiers infused pre-rolls are here. Made with whole flour, never shake, Fortifiers take the classic pre-roll to the next level. With 2 options to choose from, you can go with high terpenes for bold flavor or high potency for a stronger kick. Because sometimes you want more than a standard pre-roll. Find your fire with Daybreak Fortifiers. Available now at Kind Goods. Now you've used the word emulsification a bunch of times, and I feel like there's a lot of buzzwords in the cannabis industry, especially around emulsification technologies and beverages and things like that. We heard the term nanoemulsification became this huge thing. Everybody was like, "Oh, it's the next wave." What's the difference between emulsification and nanoemulsification whenever we're talking about this? And what are there other words that we're not hearing that aren't being slapped on the side of bags of gummies or beverages or anything that actually mean more or are more important to the process?
No. I have a bit of a soapbox. Nano is simply a descriptor on size. Somewhere, sometime, somebody in the cannabis industry that never came from a regulated industry and has never worked with a regulator decided that nano was a cool buzzword. Like, and they have artificially associated nano-sized particles with higher bioavailability and faster onset. Not a lot could be further from the truth. Emulsions are emulsions. So you have like a nano emulsion just is a marketing term to describe that my droplets are really teeny tiny, but it's still an emulsion. There's a number of ways you can go about making emulsion. There is your classic physical dispersion. That's your Italian salad dressing. You have co-solvent approaches where people will use things like PG or glycerin, which have those lipophilic and hydrophilic ends to it. But you're not creating a structure. You're just creating an intermediate form. And there's not a lot of label friendliness, and there's some adverse sensory that goes along with those things. And then traditionally, the biggest bucket is you're forming either a micellular structure, which is the M&M, or you're filling like a liposome. And a liposome is, think of a jelly donut. Now take the center out. So it's a ring structure where instead of being a circle, it's more of a ring that's filled with the payload. Um, all of them make emulsions. Not all of them make great emulsions or stable emulsions or protect the THC. So it's goes well beyond just using the word emulsion. That's just a definition of the product that I'm giving to you. The reason I have such a soapbox for the word nano is, and it's very clear that SōRSE does not in any way, shape, or form use that word. The FDA has a nanotechnology task force. Particles that are sufficiently sized have the ability to migrate anywhere in the body that they want to. So a white blood cell is 20 microns, not nano, microns. And that's the reason it's sized that way is so that it stays in your vasculature system and your white blood cells don't start leaving your veins and arteries and showing up in your pancreas and where they don't belong. Nano-sized particles can. And so the FDA has a knee-jerk and horrible response to anything that is classically described in the marketing literature as nanotechnology if you haven't done the requisite work to show that there is safety and efficacy with such a sufficiently small sized particle. And I said, for anyone that never believes me, go to CVS or Walgreens and walk around and look for the word nano. This is supplements and pharmaceuticals. You would think if the GSKs and the Mercks and the Lillys and Pfizers of the world, if there was marketing appeal to nanotussin, quiets your cough faster, they would put it on the box. They don't. And it literally comes from a lack of understanding and a lack of for what space they're playing in. It is literally a marketing exercise. And that all it is, I caution people all the time not to use it, because one day the FDA may knock on your door and go, show me it's not aggregating in the spinal fluid because you're making nanoparticles that can migrate.
So whenever people are saying that, to be clear, we're not actually talking about nanoparticles. We're talking about a buzzword used to describe small particles, right?
No, that in many cases, the people that are marketing nanoemulsions are talking about nanoparticles.
So there is potentially something that could be problematic about nanoemulsification.
There's the way it's usually guised is to say, show me that it's not doing what you don't want it to do. You don't have to, I
Okay.
don't have to assume that it's harmful. Like, it could be perfectly safe that you have cannabinoids in your spinal fluid, but until you do the work, you don't know. But you just want to make sure that you're not getting them there. You know, the first
Okay.
hurdle is don't get them where they don't belong, and then if they do show up where they don't belong, show me that it's safe.
Okay. Wow. So that opens up so many different lanes and things like that. One of the things that you've talked about a few different times, and I really latched onto, was the emulsification process and the candy coating and things like that. We're really just talking about the same thing that like gel tabs do for pharmaceuticals and stuff. It's just the delivery system, and once it gets inside your body, it breaks down, becomes bioavailable, right?
Correct. Yep. Yep. It's just we have a compound of interest. It's called, CBD, and we want to get it to the intestinal tract so that it can be absorbed and used by the body. I need to survive first pass metabolism. I need to get it. And I think what's really compelling is a lot of folks don't pay attention to necessarily the density of their finished emulsion. It's still, if you wake up in the morning and let's say you're microdosing, right? And you wake up in the morning and you got an empty stomach and you have your cannabis beverage, it's pretty much available right away because it has nothing to compete with in your stomach. Now you've just had Thanksgiving dinner and now you've taken the same one. You want it to work exactly the same way. So you want it to sort of get to the bottom of the stomach contents so that it can be readily absorbed into the intestinal tract in relatively the same time frame that like a fasting beverage consumption would indicate. And, and that traditionally is the failing of many, and it's certainly the problem with gummies for sure. We all know the gummy nightmares of how long does it take the gummy to break down and how much did you have to eat beforehand and all that fun stuff. But for beverages, you don't want it sitting on top of your stomach because you don't want your stomach to clear before you can get the cannabis. So you want to get it to the bottom first and have it be bioavailable as quickly as possible. So I think that's usually the failing of whether it's simple enough to make an emulsion. It's simple enough to put it in a can and call it a THC emulsion. Um, where it falls off the rails is it homogeneous? Is it shelf stable? Is it bioavailable in the same mechanisms in the way that I want it to work? Right. If I have a headache, I don't want to take Advil and go, well, I just had a couple burritos, so now I know it's going to take 4 hours for that Advil to work. I want my headache to go awake now. So those are some of the tricks of the trade when you come out of regulated spaces. You learn things to adjust specific attributes about products so that you can get them to the bioabsorption pathway as fast as possible.
With the rise of cannabis beverages, and also like we talked about the direction of rescheduling kind of steering, we're going to, at some point, we are going to have 100% FDA oversight on anything that is considered a medical marijuana product. So let's talk a little bit about gummies and topicals and tinctures and things. Those are all products that you guys work with as well, that you help people perfect their products and the technology behind that. What are the we've heard a lot about the pros of beverages and how quickly they're enacting and things. What are some of the pros and cons of and difficulties behind beverages, topicals, tinctures? We recently in Missouri saw a new product that is an oral THC breath spray that you shoot underneath your tongue. It goes in underneath the, against your cheek or under your tongue, mucous membrane and stuff like that. I happen to love the product. It's one of my favorites. It seems like it is quick onset and it's super low dose. What are some of the pluses and minuses and some of the difficulties in creating or helping companies perfect those products?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think if we're being honest, the one of sort of the negatives associated with your traditional beverage platform is most people already have their routine, right? Like they get up, cup of coffee on the way to work, whether it's a glass of orange juice. A THC beverage is not necessarily something that is part of your routine, and it becomes challenging to sort of adapt to that and add that into your routine. Um, so I mean, it's just sort of adapting your lifestyle as far as like if it's a lemon lime seltzer, like how many lemon lime seltzers can you drink in a day, right? Before you're like, I need something else to drink. So there are, the beverage world is not it's not all completely rainbows and unicorns. There are some challenges inherent to the beverage industry. When you look at topicals are a great platform. You do have a lot of receptors in your skin. So that's what make topicals very effective platform. Again, it's a great alternative format for people that are not inhalation consumers. It also can be very helpful for very targeted approaches. If you're not looking for an all body holistic treatment, say if you're just dealing with some ankle pain or knee pain, sometimes a topical applied directly to the area is a very effective route to go. And you see that that's analogous to the pharmaceutical world where you can take some Advil or ibuprofen, or you can put Voltaren on your skin. Gummies gummies kind of get a bit of the taken behind the woodshed sometimes, and I think unfairly. The sort of ruminating thing that all the politicians and regulators gravitate to is it's candy. So there is an appeal to people that may not be of age. And how real is that? I don't know. People Adults take chewable multivitamin or gummies all the time. So I don't know if that's necessarily, but it's easy to grasp onto, right? So that's why the politicians love it. I personally, look, I find that gummies are, some people love them, some people don't care for them. I use gummies as a use case. So gummies for me traditionally tend a little bit longer to sort of, the onset time is longer, the duration is longer because it takes, as that gummy is eroding, you're sort of bleeding out, diffusing the THC, but you still have some gummy left. So you get a longer duration of experience and sometimes a longer onset. So for me at nighttime, the best go to sleep because beverages work quickly. And then the nice thing about beverages is that you have an offset. So in an hour 45, 2 hours, you're coming down. Gummies tend to last longer. So for the people that are like, hey, trying to sleep, sometimes that bimodal thing is, why don't you have a beverage that helps you fall asleep? And then why don't you have a gummy to keep you asleep? And so I think all of the platforms sort of have their, like, an interesting use case. Again, it's, you know, I can't carry a 12-ounce can of THC seltzer onto the plane with me, but I can take a gummy, or and so it's sort of like, where am I at? What's the activity? What's going on there? I think you need to have a number of tools in your toolbox so that you can achieve the efficacious and therapeutic benefit that you want with
Well, and we
strength
see that
supply.
with regular medicine and traditional pharmacology and stuff like that. I think one of the misconceptions that I see most with cannabis is that both people inside the industry and people outside the industry think that everything is going to be uh, one size fits all in some ways. And the reality is that's not at all the case. You know, even when we go back to flower, because of the endocannabinoid system, if I smoke something, I may have a completely different reaction to it than you. But not only that, I may have a completely different reaction to it if I smoke it at 5 a.m. and I haven't had anything that day versus if I smoke it at 5 a.m. the next morning and I had coffee, orange juice, and a bran muffin 20 minutes earlier. And that's the in life. A lot of times we tend to say, okay, this is the fix for that. But the reality is there's multiple different fixes and multiple different tools. You know, that we have I have 2 kids, so I have multiple first aid kits all over my house and cars and everything. We have like 37 different sizes and types of bandages and band-aids. If one size fit all worked for everything all the time, we would have one package of band-aids that would work for any case scenario. And for whatever reason, it seems like both people inside and outside sometimes just expect cannabis to be able to fix anything for anyone at any time with the same exact delivery method, the same exact use. And the reality is, to what you said, if we look at it as a system of different tools for different times and places and conditions, cannabis can be a more comprehensive medication than just trying to fix everything with one version or one process.
Yeah, and to build on your comment, I think you're like completely spot on. It's and then you see consumers will have different requirements of milligrams. Maybe it's a microdose in the morning. Maybe it's a microdose in the afternoon. Maybe it's a little bit higher when you get home from work and are unwinding, and maybe it's even higher when you go to bed. You got to have a lot of avenues to hit how people want to consume this in the manner they want to consume and where they want to consume.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would like for us to discuss as we close out the conversation?
I think the only thing from a commentary standpoint is that we hear the doom and gloom of November and what's going to happen and the FDA oversight and the Farm Bill loophole closing. Um, I think people have lost sight of the fact that we have a recreational market in the country. The states decided this is a good thing for our state, for our constituents. We can very well see, and in fact, we are starting to see the same thing with the hemp derived products, where certain states are going to codify them. So that's going to be really interesting. Like, it's not going to be any and all. It's just going to be like the dispensary channel. There might be an avenue, but I still think, the states that have adopted it, the tax revenue is incredible, and you can't argue that. No state wants to give up that pile of money. Consumers are looking for it, and they're going to get it one way or another. Farmers, all the truckers, the co-mans, the beverage manufacturers, the can suppliers, the label makers, the flavor houses, they've all figured out a new space to work and play in and to make money. And so I don't think it's so easily going away as people think. And there certainly is more than one mechanism besides the FDA to make this stay around.
I I'm a big supporter of the hemp industry and love uh, the cannabis plant as a whole. Our big thing in Missouri was that we had no regulation the entire time. And so I've always said regulation is something that allows legitimacy and helps to quickly destigmatize and normalize products whenever we have some kind of regulations, because the biggest obstacle for Missourians, and while we cover everything, my base knowledge is Missouri, is even though it didn't happen everywhere, it was legal for elementary and middle school kids to walk in and buy THC products from gas stations, convenience stores, hemp stores, things like that. And while 99% of the actors absolutely did not do that, the fact that it was legal and that it happened even occasionally was the big sticking point for most people. And so I'm I'm all for any kind of legalized regulated market. I think that's the first step most of the time. That's what got us where we are with cannabis and medical marijuana and things like that. And I think that for me, I see the medical marijuana market as being the the firm direction of what legal marijuana and dispensaries and what we've come to expect from medical marijuana and cannabis. I see that going more and more towards the direction of FDA traditional products and less towards smokables and inhalables. And so we're going to have to find some medium ground along the way to be able to have adult use markets and things like that for adult use products. Uh, as we wrap up, the last couple questions I wanted to ask: how do we change the perspective on, I think everybody thinks of topicals as a medical product. They think of tinctures as a medical product, suppositories, tablets, things like that as medical products, right? Gummies are getting there because people have seen gummy vitamins. They've seen gummy, even gummy pain medications and stuff for in pediatric cases and stuff in the past. How do we change the perspective of beverages as a medical product as well?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So, like traditionally, the food and beverage market has not crossed into supplements or pharmaceutical. They're very different markets. Think the leaning way is for someone in the FDA, when we do see regulations, to come out and say, you know, or petition the industry and the people that actually know, the researchers, the cannabis companies. Like, what's a dose? Like, what's a safe dose that could be in a beverage format that's not, I mean, not gonna horribly affect anyone. I mean, it's not killed anyone yet. So, um, like,
Let's not start now.
I think the beverage platform, I think eventually we're gonna have a dosage cap. So I don't see the days like in a traditional market. Not the dispensaries can do whatever. Um, so I think a dosage limit is going to be a thing, and then I think that will suffice to say that okay, the FDA is, because the other format would be to go to like smaller formats where you consider a single a single can as a single dose.
Do you think we'll see a move towards more syrups and things like that as far as how we're going to treat medical marijuana as, beverage or liquid components?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and when we if we tradition if we just focus on the medical market, I think it's going to be a dosage related format, like the 5 hour energies. High sugar syrups are not traditionally thought of as a health and wellness vehicle for delivery. So, I mean, you could still make a syrup with, artificial sweeteners, but I think it needs to align with traditional. Again, going back to giving a format which the FDA is already comfortable with, um, a platform that they're used to, single dose, this particular format, dropper bottle, syringe, multiple dose. That's the way
Right.
tinctures come now. So, like I think that's a good format. It could be mints, it could be tablets, it could be patches. Any of those are anything that currently plays in the CVS and Walgreens space is probably going to be
Yeah.
okay for medical cannabis.
That's more of what I was thinking of whenever I was saying syrups, was more like the cough medicines, the tussins, and like some of the pain medicines that come in like a liquid format and
Oh yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like that.
perfectly acceptable format for the FDA. So
So, Michael, I feel like I have a million more questions and could go on and on. I guess that just means we have to have you back on in the future so that we can ask you more things. I think it'd be really cool to have you back in November as we see, some of those things kind of line out and see where the next steps are taking. In the meantime, it was phenomenal of you to lend us a little bit of your time. The amount of education that Tim and I are walking away with today, I think is staggering, and hopefully our listeners that aren't super familiar with the process of making beverages gained that knowledge and stuff as well. SōRSE Technologies, Michael Flemmens, Executive Vice President, thank you so much for your time. And if anyone who works in this space has questions, they can reach you through SōRSE Tech, SORSETECH.com, right? Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks for educating us.
Thanks for having me.
Flower Pot NYC is America's leading brand design and packaging agency for cannabis and emerging brands. They're cannabis consumers themselves, so they design packaging that doesn't just look beautiful. It protects and showcases the integrity of the product inside. Over the next 3 months, they're offering $1,000 off your first order, plus $1,000 if you refer a brand that becomes a client. They'll even beat your current packaging invoice by 5% or walk away. There's some conditions that apply. I'll let them handle that. Family run, good people, great product, Flower Pot NYC, grow with us.